the can, my complimentary Southwest water from when I flew on, oops, I'm putting myself in the center of the screen here. Ta-da, ta-da. Hey, welcome everybody. Capt Ron here with my cohorts, Dieter Staudinger up in Toronto and Diane Staudinger. No, I was just kidding. Diane Hansen here with us again. And you might notice that we have a missing member here tonight. That's our roving reporter. He is on special assignment up in the far reaches. Well, he was supposed to be taking his wife to Fiji, and they ended up in part of the time in Minnesota and part of the time in Iowa. And Deb is really smart, and I know she noticed that. So we'll hopefully get a special report from Eric as to what kind of fun they had in Minnesota. Now they have family and everything up there, and they're spending some quiet time in the cabin and all that. Talked to him this afternoon, so we'll miss him tonight, and he'll come back next week with a special report of some sort. I gave him that task, so we'll see what happens on that. Okay, and as I welcome here, this is a show for you if you have a fear of flying, for someone you know and love if you don't have a fear of flying, but you have someone around you that does. And lastly, if you just like to talk airplanes, we love to have you with us as well. And anybody who's got questions, please feel free to, if you're with us live, or even if you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave it in the make a comment, and we'll or response, and we'll get back to you but if you do it while the show's on, there's a good chance we'll actually do that. Please consider, if you haven't, joining our Facebook group, which is called FearlessFlight Birds of a Feather. It is for anybody who has a fear of flying, who's interested in helping somebody with a fear of flying. And if you haven't joined, go over there, sign up, register, and leave a message, a little bit about yourself, and then jump right in and either leave comments that you know, if you're a seasoned flyer and have overcome your fear, or you've found some tips and techniques that help you. Don't be strangers, and don't be stingy, and put those in our in the Birds of a Feather there. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about, we got a poll question, of course, to start off, and we have a special guest, Maria Luna, really, really good friend of mine, and she's been with us for a long time, and we'll tell you how long when we get her on here in just a minute. We're going to do an aviation news update. After that, we're going to talk about turbulence a little bit, which is always a popular topic. And then we'll close it up again with some real live feedback on what it's like out there from Diane out in the system. As you know, if you've been following it, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, there were countries that were doing better, thought they had skirted it, and they're finding that out. One of the most interesting things, and I probably shouldn't do this right now, but I read an article today that the youngsters, if you're an oldster like me, the people in what used to be middle age until I got there, then it was youngsters. But you know, in the 20 to 40 to 50 group now, they're finding that they are more likely to transmit than other groups, which is interesting. So they may have fewer consequences, but they have more volatility or vulnerability. Okay, and then the last thing is aviation news roundup. I'm sorry, that is the last thing, the COVID-19. So, okay, so at this point in time, let's go to the poll question. And again, it's topical, but it's in the news. So what worries you most, fear of flying or COVID-19? Because I can tell by the drop off in the number of people who are contacting me for free coaching sessions, that you guys aren't worried as much about fear of flying right now. At least you're not talking about it. And the people who are out there who are flying are much more concerned about the COVID-19, which makes sense. So we'll keep that in our agenda from week to week here until it drops out, hopefully sooner rather than later. So again, the poll question, if you have an opportunity, if you're live with us, or if you're watching the replay, is which worries you most? Your fear of flying, whatever that was or is, or the COVID-19, and I'm not limiting that to whether you're flying COVID-19, just anywhere. You know, is that bothering you?
And
okay.
I just want to, people are already responding. So thanks so much, Michelle definitely COVID-19 on a plane is actually her answer. So that's
Okay.
very clever.
As opposed to snakes on a plane. So.
Yeah. And for Elaine, it's also COVID. And I know she had a personal experience as well. So Jim, also COVID. And Paul Santa Cruz. Paul, yes, COVID. Paul is our other roving reporter. He's an airline employee at the Phoenix airport, and he is in self-isolation right now because somebody else tested positive there. And so as a precaution, I think that's number 2. Paul, if you can put that in the comments, how many times you've actually had to go into quarantine so far. All right. Are we ready for our
let's
special
bring
guest?
on Marie. See, Maria, plunk your magic twanger. We had a little quiz.
There you are.
Have you ever heard the expression plunk your magic twanger? What a hell of a way.
No, that's a first.
I would be totally surprised because you are not anywhere near old enough to do that. It was on the Buster Brown show, and it was Froggy who used to do that. So
only Ron and I know that one.
Yeah, only us senior folks here. Anyway,
people.
Great to see you, Maria. You and I, we never are that far out of touch because you're always checking in, and you are a model, fearless flyer. Now, you really are. I mean, all the effort that you put into this over the years, and you really are somebody that could inspire anybody out there who has a fear of flying. You know, and not just interacting with us and Fearless Flight and all that, but the personal responsibility you take for your own life. You know, that's one of the things that I've always noticed about you. So you'll look at collateral things that we don't get to often because everybody wants to know, what if it's turbulent? What if it's this? What if there's bad weather, whatever? And the other things are, did I drink a whole bunch of caffeine before I got on the plane today? Yeah. All those other physiological things, and am I getting enough rest? And what am I doing in the rest of my life? Because fear of flying is an anxiety disorder, and anything that triggers your stress is going to trigger anxiety and make it worse there. So anyway, what I wanted to do tonight is run through some things here to kind of focus here. And the first thing I want to ask you on behalf of myself and everybody out there, were you a fearful flyer when you first came, when you and I first met? Was your fear of flying, was that the first time you ever did it, or sought it out, or had you been afraid to fly for some time before that?
I could tell you probably since a child. I didn't fly that often, but I was always that kid that had, I get affected by my gut, immediately had the stomach ache. So when I was on the plane or on the way to the plane, I don't think I knew how to associate it for the flying, but I always had some kind of, discomfort with flying. And so I was always uncomfortable.
Okay, and that speaks to the next question, is when did you first notice it? So when you were a kid, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then, once you have a child, then you get nervous about that and flying, and if something happens, I think just the progression, it just became worse.
Okay. Was anybody else, was your mom or your dad or anybody, were they anxious about flying, or did you have any?
No, my father had passed away when I was young. My mother, nothing, nobody was really like that I remember.
Okay. So if you went back early, did it affect you? Did it affect the family? Did it affect vacation plans or anything like that? Or, just how did it affect you over the years from the time you first noticed it until you learned how to deal with it?
Well, I've always had an issue with flying in the turbulence. It just, you feel like a lack of control. I call it, you can't fix it. I can't help somebody up there at the cockpit and say, hey, you're having a problem, let me help you. So there's this lack of control. I remember us talking, I think it was 2002 or 2003, when my mother had passed away. I was flying back, already a fearful flyer, and I had a really bad incident where the plane had dropped so drastically twice. And I remember telling you how the pilot had gotten on and said, everybody put your seatbelts on, and he sounded panicked. And if he was panicked, by God, we're in trouble. And I just remember screaming and talking with my eyes closed. It was just such a bad experience. And until we spoke years later, I didn't realize that I had a panic attack on the plane. And that's what it was. I had a divorce, a move, my mom had died. And here I am, with this situation with the plane, and I thought, now I'm going to leave my daughter. So I think that incident just made it completely worse. And what prompted me to go past that fear, because I would fly every 4 to 5 years, was when my grandfather had passed away, and I had talked to him 2-3 weeks prior to his death. And I remember saying to him, in Spanish, I'm sorry, I'm going to come see you soon. And when I got that phone call, that was the driving force. It really hurt my soul that fear of flying kept me from seeing my grandfather, my grandparents. And I was determined that I was not going to allow that fear to ruin my experiences or seeing people.
Okay. And so when we met for the class, was that the first time you'd ever really done anything for it, or had you tried some other things before that?
I think that was the only time I had tried. I literally went to someone for medication. I went to a hypnotist, and I went to see you because my grandfather had died, and I couldn't get myself on a plane to even go to service or to something with my family, because it was overwhelming for me.
So about how many years would you describe yourself as having a fear of flying prior to that time?
Probably since I was a teenager.
Okay.
So I mean, years.
10, 15?
Yes.
Yeah. And again, I like to point that out, because that's the average for people out there. The average person waits about 10 years before they do anything about it. And the significance of that is not only the length of time that you spend, dreading it, if you will, but it's really reinforcing it. Particularly if you get yourself up where you buy a ticket and maybe go to the airport, maybe either have a bad experience or worse, get on the airplane and get off, because then all of the hormones the reward hormones, like dopamine for one, that you get from a positive experience, when you say, I'm getting off this flight, that kicks in and it reinforces, oh, that felt good. What I was doing before felt crummy, but getting off that airplane felt really good. And so in a fashion, that's what happens to people the more you delay. So avoiding is not a strategy. Avoiding works if you're never, ever going to fly. But
that was the tip that you gave me that really made me fly every year to year and a half to 2 years. I never went past to 4, 5, 6 years in a row of having that lapse of not flying, because you were right. I remember you saying repetition to get through that fear, and it has made a big difference.
Okay, and so the other questions that I had on here, we've kind of touched on here, was the more about the history, and you when you were little and you noticed that you had a fear of flying, you had that one typical that bad experience when the pilots came on in a heightened voice, as you would describe it, and that's unfortunate, because when you're little or when you're young like that, or even any stage of your life. We had that a few weeks ago. Someone said, I was doing okay, but then the pilots came on and they said, flight attendants, take your seats, and with a sense of urgency. And if you don't know what's going on, you take that, you can interpret that sense of urgency into desperation. Like, oh my God, the pilots didn't even know that this was coming. What's going to happen now? And really, I when I was teaching recurrent classes and teaching this special subject called human factors to the pilots, with all the experience I had with fearful flyers, I would tell them, when you make a PA, you want to do it, you want to speak to about the 6th grade level. You don't want it too complicated or too dumb, because it affects the way people interpret it. You want to formulate it a little bit, and you want to end with reassurance, like, hey folks, that may have sounded kind of abrupt and panicky, but I just wanted you. And he wouldn't have time to do that right then, but he would have the presence of mind, hopefully afterwards, to say, hey folks, I apologize for the sense of urgency that you might have heard in my voice. That was mainly because this was unexpected, and I wanted the flight attendants to be seated as quickly as possible to not risk injuring them.
And we actually have a flight attendant right here on our show, flying as
See if you can get her. See if you can find her.
I think I'm here.
So
Actually, I had that exact scenario on one of my legs in my last trip, which was 5 days long. We were coming into, it was such a long trip that I don't even remember which day it was, but we hit some turbulence, and the pilots called us on the interphone and said, we're going to hit some turbulence. You know, we need everybody, you all need to sit down. And so our responsibility is to, the first thing obviously is to ensure that all our passengers are buckled up, because unfortunately, even when the seatbelt sign is on and we expect everyone to have their seatbelt on, they don't always. And so I'm going down the aisle looking at everyone to make sure they had their seatbelt on, and not everyone did. And so my announcement, and then as I'm going down the aisle, may have sounded to the passengers to be, I don't want to say panicked, but heightened in its delivery. But the only reason it sounds like that is because our first and foremost and only responsibility is the safety of all of our passengers. And so it's making sure that all the seatbelts are buckled and the tray tables are up and people are aware of the situation. And we were bouncing around, and I'm holding on to the bins, trying to make sure that I don't fall out of the aisle. So as everyone has said, as Ron has said, we are not panicked. We are really concerned that our passengers are safe, and then to make sure they're all safe, and then for us to sit down.
And let me make the distinction between panic and
Right.
startle response.
Right.
So Diane's very susceptible to being startled. I am in the cockpit. You know,
Sure.
if I'm flying along fat, dumb, and happy, and we hit a downdraft, a sudden downdraft, particularly if it was smooth for miles and miles before that, my blood pressure is going to go up, and my voice is going to go up, and you know, and all that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we try to teach you all out there, and that is I'm going to count to 10 metaphorically, and I'm going to try to switch from my elephant brain that said, oh my God, we're going to die, to my rider brain that's much more logical and analytical, and say, wait a minute, if this was really, really dangerous, I wouldn't be here thinking right now. I'd be some part of space now. And so, and just to kind of close this, so for you, Maria, that it wasn't just the turbulence, but it was the way you interpreted that pilot's announcement, right? And it clearly was kind of like a line of demarcation in your life. It sounds like from that point on, it didn't get any better.
It would just understand that I screamed, and it was involuntary. I screamed, my feet went up to the seat. And I didn't realize again that was a panic attack afterwards, was talking in I don't know if it was English or Spanish. If you gave me $1 million and said, give me one sentence you said, I would lose my $1 million. I couldn't tell you what came out of my mouth. It wasn't bad words. It was some kind of craziness. And the whole time I remember just holding on. I wouldn't open my eyes. And my sister, I could hear her talking to somebody afterwards when things were calm. And I hear a gentleman say to her, is she all right? Is she all right? Because I'm, and I'm having this meltdown, and I wouldn't open my eyes. It's involuntary. And I remember her saying, she's fine. Oh, we just came back from a funeral. She's upset. Like she was humiliated. She was embarrassed. Right. Everyone screamed in the plane. I wasn't the only one. I was the only one that continued to babble, for a while. And, later on, she says, yeah, the pilot came out. And I said, had I opened my eyes and saw a pilot sitting there asking me if I'm okay when he was, I said, I would have died. That would have been it for me. Right. I would have had a heart attack, and I would have not existed anymore. So it was embarrassing.
It's
my
a
face
perfect
is
storm.
red thinking about it.
Yeah. A perfect storm. Yeah. You get startled. You follow it up by a misinterpretation of the energy in the pilot's voice. And then you get embarrassed, and you're set for life. That's the welcome to being a human, because that's what causes a lot of anxiety for people. So
absolutely.
All right,
when you're done in the walk of shame, once you land and everything is perfectly fine and everyone's looking at you, everybody yelled and everybody screamed, but I was the one. It's very embarrassing. So
right. I have visions of you because I know how tiny you are. You don't weigh 100 pounds wet probably. And your feet coming up, if you aren't strapped in, you are going to be a flying dust particle in that airplane.
Well, not anymore, but back then I was like,
Yeah. So, okay. So here we are in 2020. We have another thing, but it's called COVID-19. We'll defer that for just a little bit here, but I want to just have you bring everybody up to date. Are you still flying? Because I have people, first of all, how long ago was this when you and I first met?
I looked at my notes. I want to say 2002 or 2003.
Okay.
2008 is when we went through the photos that I sent you. That was,
Okay.
It was 2008. Okay. So I have been working on this since then, and I have come a long way. I'm not perfect. I still have my little weirdness, but I always tell people, you can make fun of me all you want. I still get on the plane. I still fly every year and a half, and I conquer that fear. And it takes a lot, but I am that determined still since that time frame. I'm still at it.
You embody what I love in Fearful Flyers, overcoming this. One, you're persistent, okay, and you just keep at it. And two, you're perseverant. You don't care what people do, you know, what they say, and that's the real beauty about knowing you and watching you as you've gone through the years, Maria. It's just really impressive there. And you had Dieter might show some of the other slides there with the pictures there. One of the things was I was still working in the training department at the time, and we got to go out to where I worked, and we had some mock-ups, and we got to play with the doors and all that stuff. And if we can get that one picture up with just you closing the door, because the door weighs more than you do, and so
it was like nothing to open that door for me.
And when we hold the live classes in Phoenix, or when I do a little bit of an orientation with somebody one-on-one with an airplane, one of the things that a lot of people freak out about is the door. It looks complex, you know, especially the older ones, like the ones on a 737. And it's big locking mechanism and all that. And what I do is I just let people open the door, and that's what we did with you that day. And Joanna, like we got Joanna.
And Joanna, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so here we are in 2020. I know you flew recently because you often contact me and say, "Hey, Ron, I'm flying," which I love because it's not that you contact me so much, but it's putting out there, reaching out to the rest of the world and connecting socially with somebody else and saying, "Hey, world, help me out on this. I don't need to do this on my own." So you had a flight. You want to tell people about the flight, because you had a little bit of an irregularity with this one, right?
I did. I just want to say that with COVID and a fear of flying, I mean, that's just a really tough combination. And I really had to make that decision whether I was going to do that or not. I mean, that was a tough decision. So I had to get through two different fears, right? So quarantining myself so that I don't bring anything to a friend that I'm going to go visit, that was tough. I'm trying to be extremely responsible, quarantine for weeks. And then thinking, how can I keep myself safe?
Yeah.
I did, first of all, it took me a few weeks. This is how I roll. I do my research. I got to look at every plane. I got to look how big the plane is. I have to see how many seats. This is how I roll. I remember you telling me I had an issue. I had a brain, just totally meltdown over whether I couldn't sit on the left. And I remember you saying, "What's wrong with sitting on the right? What's going to happen?" I'm like, "Oh, I guess nothing." You know, you get hung up on these weird things.
But the important thing that you're bringing up is here, you find out the story that you're telling yourself, and when you put it in the light, like a lot of other stuff in the light, the shadow disappears, right? So that's the important thing. It's not so much, you know, having, you know, I can't sit in the left, sit in the right, but when you bring that out, and that's what people do for me when I coach them, you know, is I need to know what your story is, because that's what's crippling you. So anyway, go ahead.
Absolutely, the story, and then so long story short, I was upset because at first I couldn't find a direct flight, and I hate takeoffs. So takeoffs are really harsh on me. And so now that was, you know, a stressor. I finally go through all my homework, 3 weeks, every single day in the evening going through. So I get everything done. 2 weeks prior to my flight, American Airlines says, "Hi, we changed 3 of your 4 scheduled flights." So heart attack. Like heart, you're like, wait, you know, you're shaking me up. This is not supposed to happen. I've already done it. I've done my homework. I've pictured it. I had to go back. It took me a day because I'm like, I can't call them today because I'm not doing well. I have to get in a good place. Everything worked out. I'm okay with the changes. So then we get there. The first flight was fine. That, you know, the takeoff is a little bit. The second leg of the flight was was bumpy. That was a little rough in the landing. I get there. I have a wonderful time.
And you didn't ruin your trip worrying about the trip home.
No, I
Right.
have a problem with breathing in the mask. That's why I don't go out that often. So what I did is, the pilot did mention this on the first flight, was that this is not like recycled air. This is fresh air that's going to come through the plane. I didn't realize that. So what I did is I put the air full blast and I pulled it and I let the air come through so that I wouldn't panic because I couldn't breathe through that 2.5 hour flight.
So let me ask you this. So, and I kind of have this as well. So when you breathe in the mask, I don't like my own hot breath coming back in me, but I'm guessing that people like you, it's almost a little bit of claustrophobia, right? It's being containerized, even though you can see around you and all that. I'm asking, you know, if that's the
I don't know if it's really that, or that I feel like I don't get a good breath like when I breathe anyway because of allergies pretty bad. So I can't do like a 3 breaths. I think I contribute it to that being an issue. And so, and then you can't breathe. And I think a little claustrophobia of it. So when I walk around, I'm pretty much pulling it the whole time and getting deep breaths in order to continue to do. So it's a little hard, you know, but that helped a lot to hear him say that, feel comfortable I'm not doing the whole mask, but I'm just doing enough that I can do that. So that helped. Now I have a wonderful time. My friends and I are celebrating our birthdays together. This is amazing. I go back to the airport. We're dropped off. It's a gorgeous day. And all of a sudden, we're going to board in 5 minutes. You hear thunder all of a sudden. You hear lightning. And then I hear people going, the plane got hit with lightning. And then they say it, the plane got hit. We have to check it again. And I call, and then torrential, oh my God, downpour. It was all over the news, and it only lasted like 20, 30 minutes. And I remember anything you said to me was like Charlie Brown, wah, wah, wah. I don't hear what you're saying. The plane got, and I'm storytelling.
Yeah.
And talking to, I think I texted you and you're like, it's fine. They're going to make sure it's airworthy. And I'm like, I mean, you almost had to slap me. I was slow motion like a robot. I was doing my work. He says it's safe. They would not put us back on a plane if it wasn't safe. You can push through. You can do. It was a lot on my body. Honest to God, it was a lot on my body of COVID, of fear of flying, and really the plane I'm getting on. I kept thinking this was a joke. This could have happened to me. And then what made me calm down was I want to hear this while I'm on the ground and I'm not on the plane.
Absolutely.
That's what made me not lose my
right. And what you're demonstrating for everybody is resilience, and resilience transcends fear of flying, right? The more resilient we are, the better we can withstand changes in our life. And let me tell you, nothing is like aviation. And you were at DFW, right, down in Dallas? I think it's where you were.
No, that one happened at Myrtle, and Myrtle Beach was supposed to go
Myrtle
to
Beach.
Dallas.
Oh yeah, same thing. Dallas all the way to the East Coast and the Southeast. When it rains, it doesn't do anything but pour. And whenever it pours, it's got thunder and lightning and all that stuff in there. So yeah, so good. So way to assess. Hey, we're on the ground. That's the best time to get hit by lightning. I'm in the terminal, not out on a golf course holding my golf club up. Yeah. So good job. Good job. So we did kind of touch on the COVID-19. Diane, any observations, this last week? People the world is getting more amped up. So did you see any evidence of that?
Yes, absolutely. The first thing always is that each airline is different, but that as time has gone on, number one, virtually all the airports are requiring you to have a mask on when you enter the airport. That's number one. back when all this started, the different airlines were kind of at different places, but now they're kind of all coming to the same spot. They are all closing in on the same spot. And the spot they're closing in on is pretty, I don't want to say strict, but uniform, in that for American and Southwest, American starting tomorrow, and then Southwest certainly, even if you have a passenger has a valid medical condition that would ask or require for that individual not to wear a mask, they may not fly. So starting tomorrow for American, and certainly for Southwest, everyone age 2 and older has to have a mask on. If you cannot wear a mask, you cannot fly, period. You will either have to find another mode of transportation or not go where you're going. So that's a sea change.
And this is where Delta's been for the last month.
And this is, well, Delta and United have been at a little bit different spot, in that they have a screening process, so that when you come to the gate agent, the customer service agent at the gate, if you are requesting a medical exemption to the mask requirement, it could take up to an hour of questioning and screening for you to answer specific questions with regard to a possible COVID history. So for those individuals on those airlines who are requesting those kinds of exemptions, you need to make sure you have allotted enough time prior to the boarding process. A couple other things along those same lines, that of course, one of the, not exceptions, but one of the times you may remove your mask when you're on board is when you're eating or drinking. I've had a couple of situations where a family has boarded and the mom has given their children lollipops, and that is their reason for not putting their mask on. Those kinds of things are, just to let everybody know, those kinds of things are going to go away. We are not in the position as flight attendants we're not enforcers, but we're informers, let's just say. And if we as flight attendants don't see someone abusing the recommendation or the requirement, 9 times out of 10, actually, basically at this point, in my experience, 10 times out of 10, another passenger will bring it to our attention. And if someone is in that position of abusing the eating and drinking exemption, if they do not comply, we have to report it. And Delta has put at least 100 people on their banned list. They're not allowed to fly anymore.
I was just going to say, Diane, in Canada, that's been happening since we had this for the last two months, probably a little bit more. And so each airline is actually required to share that no-fly list with other airlines and with the health agencies, so that if anything happens, contact tracing can, start from that point. And just, you want to be proactive, you want to be
and that's
vigilant.
that's a very important thing, is if a passenger thinks that he or she can get away with something on one particular airline, and then fly on another one, that, those kinds of things aren't going to happen anymore, because there is going to be a sharing of the passenger, the banned passenger or the non-compliant passengers with all of the airlines. And so if someone is not compliant with our directives, then very soon, very, very soon, their name is going to be shared with all of the airlines, and they will
It's
not.
a new no-fly list, basically.
Basically, it's a no-fly list, and it's an extremely important. And we as flight attendants, as crew, we are always wearing our mask. As I know I've said before in previous weeks, the only time I take my mask down is to give an and we have a number of announcements, but to give an announcement so that the passengers can hear us. But that's it. I mean, we are always wearing our masks, and so we don't want to be, very difficult as we go up and down the aisles. But it's very, very important for everyone's safety that we enforce and we observe that sort of thing. And along those lines, we are finding, I have seen more individuals, more passengers with the face shields, that they're wearing a face shield. However, and that's fine, but that does not substitute for a mask. You still have to wear a mask. So if you have a face shield, that's fine, but that's not enough.
The face shields, I understand, that's protection from other people. The mask, you're protecting the other people. So.
And our comments, kind of echo actually support for exactly what you were saying, Ron was saying. Proactive saves lives. Susan Miglagio, hey Susan. We're still working on that 301 class in Boston at some point. But also, I remember we did a show, last year, when at the height of these exemptions for passengers to bring on emotional support animals. And of course, there were a lot of these, that's, as a non-North American coming from Europe, I always am amazed at the craftiness, in North America. There's always going to be somebody who's going to sell you a fake license. And apparently Michelle Villa said that there are a lot of these exemption cards were more or less bought, right?
Yeah.
And are more or less fake, really.
Yeah,
so
they're very fake. Yeah.
It's the same person carrying their fee.
Yeah.
But the bottom line with all this is you have to have your mask on when you get into the airport. Every single airport, you have to have your mask on when you're completely going through the airport, when you're boarding the plane, when you're on the plane. The only time you can have and trust me, you cannot sip a bottle of water for half an hour and get away with it with your mask off. That's not going to happen. We are going to talk to you about it. And if you're not compliant, we're going to take your name, your seat number, the flight number, and we're going to report it to our own airline. And that's going to go to everybody.
And Diane, can you repeat for everybody just what is your first priority as a flight attendant?
Always safety. We had I had a 5-day trip this last long weekend. And one of our landings, and it was lost on me which one it was because they all kind of blend together. We wound up all of a sudden with a bunch of turbulence, and the pilots called both of the flight attendants on it. They called us on the interphone, and they said, it's going to get bad, button up. So we made sure everybody was buttoned up. But as I'm going down the aisle from the aft of the airplane forward, it got really bouncy. And I don't want to say I was holding on for dear life, but I was certainly holding on. So we are serious when we say keep those seat belts on all the time. I don't want to have to go down the aisle and risk my life trying to make sure that you've got your seatbelt on.
Hopefully you didn't say what one of the flight attendants said to one of my fearful flyers as the momentum carried her to her knees, and as she went down, she was kneeling right alongside of this fearful flyer, and she said, "Oh my God, we're going down." So those are not words that we want to hear from the flight attendant. But what a great segue into turbulence. And here comes the big finish. So if you want to put slide number 8 up there, Dieter.
Okay.
Turbulence.
Can I just two things, Ron, real quick, real quick. So number one, do you recall how many employees American Airlines has?
It's in the 100,000s.
Okay. What I wanted
150. Yeah, I'm guessing 150.
So if anyone who is watching this thinks that this is harsh or it shouldn't be, all American Airlines employees, as we have comments here, are required or no work, you know, so it's
absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, this is really, everybody's trying to keep you safe.
Yes.
And has to keep themselves safe at the same
Right.
time. And
Absolutely.
the second thing is, there was a question for Maria. How was it for you to be in the airport in this very different, you know, feel? I mean, I remember traveling back from Thailand at the end of March, and it was a different world at an airport. So how was that for you? And just quickly, because I think, as the comment suggests, you know, people are wondering about that.
It was another element of stress for me. It's more about making sure that you're prepared. You're doing your mental work you conquer your fear. Now you have the situation of the breathing, and then it also, I want to say, it's just, you always, I think it's subconscious, because I feel like I have to work on my immunity. I work on it hard. It's my responsibility to be safe and take your temperature before I left and everything, to make sure that I could fly safely. But it was a little weird. You could see the tension, because I read people's energy. So you see people who they go through it like not a big deal, and there's other ones who are struggling, they're uncomfortable. There is an added element of stress, I call it, in the universe and the energy. It's there. You can see, you can feel it in the airport.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
It seems to be having, we're finally, because of the severity, I heard today that there was a recent poll where now it's losing the line of distinction between the two political parties in the US. 49 and 40 and 48, I think, are the percentages. Both Republicans and Democrats both think that it's time to wear the mask. So it's kind of cool. Instead of it was a little bit more of disparity before that.
One extra thing that we have to do for us and my airline is that before we fly every single morning, we have a self-assessment check. And so we, as crew members, pilots, and the flight attendants, have to go through a self-assessment and submit to our airline that we are fit, as Ron knows, fit to fly. That is the phrase. Is if you
do they measure your temperature or anything?
We have to do that. That's part of what we have to do. Yeah, we have to. The part of the self-assessment is our temperature, and then we submit that we are fit to fly, and then we can go.
Okay. All right. Now, without further ado, let's talk about turbulence. That's so much fun.
Oh, my favorite.
It makes you feel alive. If you had your flight and you didn't have any turbulence, demand a refund. you didn't get your money's worth. It's not right. All right. So there it is, the big bad blue marble, and those arrows running around there. Notice how the arrows go from the left side of the globe there to the right. Why is that? That's because the Earth is turning underneath, and because the Earth has an atmosphere, there's friction between the part of the atmosphere that's closest to the Earth and the atmosphere over it. So it does that. And that's basically why that, and the temperature of the air mass above it, is why we have jet streams. And because we have jet streams, that determines that we'll have weather all over the globe. So it's responsible for the macro picture of weather on the planet and the micro. Because we have jet streams contributed to those thunderstorms in Myrtle Beach that Maria was talking about there before. The next slide, Dieter, I don't know, did we get it to work there where we could?
No, the video okay.
It's a real cool video there.
I'll put the link in the comments already.
These are really neat, and it just shows you it's a dynamic picture of how that is the polar jet stream. I didn't call that to everyone's attention there. There's a polar in the North Pole, and there's a polar at the South Pole, and then there's two subtropical jets, and they affect the world's weather patterns there. And then on the next slide, I'll probably this video is one that we could get to play as well if we get that to come up there. The next one with the Coriolis effect.
Yeah. So I'm gonna this one.
There we go. Okay. So imagine the pictures might not be as helpful, but you'll be able
to. It actually played once. So let me just try it. No.
Okay. Cool. And imagine you've got a globe, okay, or a big ball of ice cream here, and you're pouring hot fudge over the top. All right. And so what happens, that globe is spinning underneath and that hot fudge comes down and there's irregularities in it. And so some places it drops down further right off. Some places it stays higher on that. And that's what happens with the heating of the planet. It's colder at the poles and warmer at the equator. And so this cold air mass is constantly forming over the poles. And then as it slides down, the earth is turning underneath, and the spinning, if you've ever been on a merry-go-round and you throw a ball off the merry-go-round, your illusion is that the ball is curving like that. And that is literally what happens. So that's how the jet stream gets formed. And jet stream is the primary place where you get clear air turbulence. And that is turbulence that you cannot see. Now, we as pilots, we know that sometimes we get light ice crystal type clouds called cirrus clouds. They're little whiff clouds out there. That's a technical term. Don't try that at home. And so sometimes until now, that has been the only visible sign that we could have that there may be clear air turbulence or maybe a jet stream in the area, and maybe clear air turbulence as a result of that. Okay, so this next slide, it talks about new technology, and thanks to Ronnie Vella, who was our guest last week, he mentioned this to me. So I went through and researched it. He said, "Hey Ron, I think there's a system out there that's going to be able to detect turbulence." Well, there is a system on the 787. It's an internal system. It's a bunch of very sophisticated servos with actuators, and it actually senses a bobble, if you will, in the airplane, and it positions the flight control to offset that. So it's a responsive system. But this one that isn't it. This one is a laser called LiDAR, and let me get that up there.
Can I just say that it looks more and more like some space?
Yeah, and it really is. It is right out of Star Wars. And what they've done is this is the good news is this is not a concept anymore. This is not theory. This is a thing in practice. They used a 747 or a 777 freighter that they mounted this big laser gun. Basically, it weighs 185 pounds, and one of the future goals is to miniaturize it more and then be able to stick it on underneath the airplane probably, but it has been able to detect particles and the motion of particles, and I mean, this really is gee whiz stuff. This is pure freaking magic, even to a pilot. And somebody had the idea. They used this same technology that they had been using to look for earthquakes and motion from space. So they would shine this down on the globe there. And it says I got a little narrative here. It says, the beam goes out the side, reflects off a mirror, and is focused miles ahead of the airplane. It's detecting tiny particles in the air called aerosols, not unlike COVID, I guess. But when these particles seem to slow down, speed up, or move up or down, that's the warning. And they actually took this up into the atmosphere. That we're wondering, well, how are we going to test this out? So they found a day when it was smooth below the jet altitude. They climbed up into it, got into some really good turbulence, and they were able to detect this. Now, the early stages of it, it's not operational yet. It's not on other airplanes because one, I mentioned the size and the weight of the thing. The other one is that it's only effective out to about 10 miles now. And at the speeds we travel, basically 6 miles a minute is how fast you're going through the air. That only gives you a little over a minute of notice. And what we'd like to have for Diane and for Maria, we'd like to have a little bit more than a 30-second warning. Say, oh my God, sit down!
That would really be great.
Yeah, exactly. So their goal is to get it out to where they can see 30 to 40 miles out in advance of the airplane, and that's going to generate as much as 5 minutes of notice, which would be it's really fantastic. 5 minutes is a lifetime when you're talking about that. Yeah. So future goals now is to make the system smaller, lower it in size and in weight, and then get it to where we can get it out there and broadcast 30 to 40 miles out there. So that's a great place to wind up tonight. A little optimism, and I'm confident that'll happen in my lifetime. Probably, hopefully, a lot sooner than my lifetime ends. But I'm really confident that based on that, because I had never heard of that before. And again, it's another example of how technology in one area of our lives, sometimes somebody very innovative finds a use for it in another area. And that would be really, really cool, because I would think, although they were testing it in clear air turbulence, I would think that we could also use that in areas of convective buildups where you have thunderstorms and things like that. I don't know. I'm speaking out of turn because I don't know that. But certainly clear air turbulence, it would really help, because we really have virtually very little or no warning when we hit turbulence up there, other than other airplanes that have already encountered it. So anyway, so keep your fingers crossed, and you won't have to go to turbulence.com anymore. Do that anyway. So anyway, all right. Hey, I want to thank you, Maria. Super big thanks to you for coming on, being vulnerable with everybody, and talking about your experience. Thanks, Diane, for the live real-time information out in the real world out there. Dieter, thanks a lot again for coming in, and we cranked this thing out about 20 minutes before we get go live here.
Yeah,
and,
after you prepared for days. Sure.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So the overnight sensation, right? It just
and we'll even shout out to Eric, who said he's going to watch the replay. Yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah, right.
But we're looking for a big
quiz
report.
him, Maria, we'll quiz him.
Yeah, and he told me for anybody who's listened to Eric at all, East Snowshoe, Wisconsin. He put that in there. So I told him that we need a report from East Snowshoe, Wisconsin.
I thought it was Overshoe.
Every
Overshoe, not Snowshoe, Overshoe.
Every takeoff requires de-icing.
There you go. Yeah. So we'll see if he made it to East Overshoe. So anyway, thanks everybody. We'll see you again next week at Fearless Flight Live. Have a great week and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.